Brendan says Celtic's performance was nowhere near good enough, even though we got the win against Livingston. But it's March. Is that not on you, Brendan? That's this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. Did you know we send all our YouTube revenue to charity, to the Kano Foundation? They have a link in the bio. You can check out what they do. But they take kids to Celtic games for free, and all the money we make from our YouTube channel, including people who pay to watch without adverts, we're going to send it to the Kano Foundation between now and the end of the season to help them out. They're a fantastic charity. Check out what they do in the link below, and if you want to help them out, you can support them there directly, or you can support them by subscribing to 20 Minute Tims. You can click that subscribe button. Melly, Stephen.
Good evening. Yes.
Before we sit down to set up for the podcast, we look on the internet for talking points of the week. I'm showing people what goes into the secret sauce a little bit.
Yeah, showing people how the sausage gets made.
So I googled a performance nowhere near good enough, Brendan, because I wanted to find Brendan's exact quotes about the Livingston game that we just completed there, and about 5 times this season, Brendan has used the exact phrase, nowhere near good enough. And Melly just sort of at the spur of the moment brought up the point. He says, it's March. Is that not the manager's fault now? So we thought we'll have a right good bare knuckle debate about who really is responsible, because you go back and forward, don't you, Stephen? This is the conversation we had before we even turned the mics on. We probably should have turned it on, saved ourselves 2 hours, but
yeah,
we'll just have it again for the purposes of the audience. You're like, right, okay, so it's down to the manager that the performances should be better, but then you look at the players and you go, but how can you get better performances with these players? But it is March, there's no getting away from it. Time waits for no man, as Brendan Rodgers pointed out when he was talking about James Forrest, and we're going to get to that, but it doesn't wait for Brendan Rodgers either.
No, and yeah, look, Celtic won the game. Celtic won the game fairly comfortably in the end, but again, he has come away from a performance in which Celtic won thinking that it was nowhere near the level expected of them. And as we've been having the discussion for a number of weeks, it's not coming now. I think every game to some extent is going to be a struggle, save for the odd explosive out of nowhere performance like the Dundee game about 10 days ago as we record this now. That was an incredible performance, but I think I've settled into the rhythm of being unsure which Celtic are going to turn up on the day. Quite often it is a bit of a slog. Whose fault it is, there are so many things. I don't think you can just point and say that it's any one individual's fault. I don't think it's necessarily the manager or the head of recruitment that is now gone or about to be gone. I think there are a number of factors, chiefly among them probably that we've had too many injuries that any one team can be expected to carry in any season and still be at their top level. That's not, I don't intend that as an excuse. I'm giving that as a reason that I don't think Celtic have hit anywhere near the top form that we expected of them this season, because this season was going to be big. You know, it was going to be really exciting. We won the treble and all that last season. We've brought in this big manager and we're going to continue everything and everything's going to get better. And for a number of reasons.
How long has passed since that pre-season that we were all hoping things were going to be good? Because it feels like 7 years has passed.
It does, doesn't it? It's one of those weird seasons. In many ways it feels like it's absolutely flown in, because that doesn't feel that long ago, but then you think back to it, then we sat down so excited about this season, but it feels literally like 7 years ago, as you say. So whose fault was it? I don't know. We can have the discussion about it, and we have had it many times. I don't think the players are very good. Now, I'm going to be totally brutally honest here. I don't think a lot of the players are very good, and even the players who we do have, who are very, very good, who are undeniably good, have been injured for too long, and some have played too much and are now absolutely shattered by the looks of it. So it has culminated again in a win. Yes, it was definitely a win against Livingston, and it's a cup game. That is by far the most important thing. But it does give you that little pause for thought about, right, well, what if that happens again and we don't get away with it? What if it happens in a crucial away game, because we can't afford any more of those in the league?
It is. How are the hair levels, Melly, before we...
To and fro from it. I think with, like Stephen was saying, the Dundee game, but I think since the Kilmarnock game, Celtic have been decent, and that doesn't mean to say they've been good, but they've been decent for Celtic this season. They've been able to throw up the odd game. I know they get beat by Hearts, but I didn't really think that was a performance thing that Celtic get beat by Hearts. I think it was just everything conspired against us, and it was one of those games. But I think we've been all right, but even the Livingston game where you win 4-2 and Kuhn does well and one of your players gets the hat-trick, I'm not coming away from it thinking, right, that's us. If it's the opposite effect. I'm coming away from it going, this isn't a very good team, but they've just scored 4 goals. So I don't know where I'm going with this team, and I think that's because they don't know where they're going, because I don't know what I'm going to get next week. Then, we're working towards another break. It seems to be, right, let's get to August and see where we are. Then it was get to January, and look, there's a couple of international breaks in there. We'll get players back, and then it's January, we'll bring in quality, and then it's, we'll bring back Carter Vickers, and nothing seems to change no matter what we do here. So I think this is going to be the way it is, but after that performance at the weekend, in which I don't think Celtic were terrible, but just parts of their game, I'm thinking, do I see this team winning the league? And I can't see it. There was some shoots of positivity, but again, with Brendan Rodgers, I'm going, right, it's March, we should know what you're trying to do here. Then I look out and see Liam Scales and Stephen Welsh, and I go, what do we do? Play somebody else? But if Lagerbielke's not even getting a game ahead of them, he's obviously not as good as them. So I just don't know.
That's where I'm at, Stephen, because I feel we're qualified, or we're fair enough to discuss the performance as a negative, because I know people will be listening to this going, we won what you won, but well, this
Move on.
Yeah, well, this is led from the manager's comments. He came out after the game and said it wasn't good enough again. And the reason we obviously can't mention who we're playing in the next round is because by the time we're recording this, we don't know, which is worth mentioning, because it will be by the time it's out.
Yes,
we'll know. But we're kind of Apollo 13 in it, aren't we? That through this, and I think Celtic have got a bit of a Brendan Rodgers, I think, is suffering from a bit of a branding problem insofar as we're watching Celtic, we see the strips, but it doesn't look like Celtic. And it's like, if, to use another analogy, imagine they made a Apollo 13 a sequel, but it was just guys for the bill. It was actors from the bill they used. The people we were watching going, this isn't Tom Hanks, like this isn't the same, but you still expect it to feel the same. And I think that's the problem that Brendan's got, where he's at a very difficult crossroads, I think, with Brendan Rodgers, because he's trying to play a certain way with Celtic. It's a challenging way to play. This is something that CALLUM McGregor said, and he needs the players to get on board and try and play that way. And we did see this under Ange. We saw Ange trying to brute force his playing style through the players, but the problem with that was it started to click for Ange.
Yeah.
Whereas Brendan, it's maybe starting to click in a slower way, and the reason I think it's starting to click is because Kuhn was better.
Oh yeah,
there.
Course, yeah.
Yang's been better, so it tells me that maybe players are starting to get a wee bit better here and there, some sort of shoots of positivity, but then you get an injury to CALLUM McGregor, then you get an injury to Carter Vickers, then you're reminded of who's going to fill in for these guys. Bernardo looked good a couple of months ago for a couple of weeks. He's a nothing player really, and Stephen Welsh and Liam Scales at the back. We've discussed Liam Scales to absolute death, so it's kind of like you're watching Celtic, but it's not really Celtic, and I think that's a problem Brendan Rodgers has got. He can't just turn Liam Scales into Tom Hanks.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And it's a good week for Liam Scales, because Liam Scales, we have had our criticisms of Liam Scales, but Stephen Welsh steps forward. I've got this week, Liam. You step back. It's
interesting because Liam Scales is the whipping boy, right? He's the whipping boy, but the connoisseurs know it's Stephen Welsh that's worse. Right? And now, look, sometimes I feel bad coming on this podcast and just having a laugh and a joke and slagging these players, right? But it is not our fault as fans that we are used to seeing much better players play for Celtic.
Yeah.
So when someone comes in that's of a lower standard, you are left feeling a bit shortchanged, a bit pissed off, and you can't help but compare the Welsh or whoever, just take Stephen Welsh, you can't help but compare him to Carter Vickers and say this guy's much worse. That's just, it's no spoiled, it's no entitled, it's just we know that a better standard of player is easily available to Celtic. Ergo, the guys that fill in, if they're not as good, they're going to get slaughtered.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and you're being very charitable by pointing out the players that have got better recently, because Yang definitely improved for at least one game. He was man of the match against Dundee. Kuhn looked very good for a game as it stands against who were playing? Livingston, of course. Very forgettable, as was demonstrated there. But then that coincides with Bernardo, as you say, falling off a cliff. He's no longer really all that much of a concern, to the point where we've gone, he's kind of nothing, Oh, brilliant, 3 games, absolutely. Get him signed, pay the $6 million, and then straight back down to nothing again. Matt O'Reilly has fallen off a cliff recently
looks knackered,
as well.
doesn't he?
He looks bereft. Matt O'Reilly, he looks basically shattered.
I don't think he's fallen off a cliff. I will step in to defend him a wee bit, but he does look, especially that goal, the lines, he just looked like he was just exhausted a wee bit. But this must be the most games Matt O'Reilly started for us since he came in. Melly, you might know a bit, but you might be able to pull that off the dome. But he was in and out a lot more last season than he was this season.
Adam Moy came in and we had choices there to give him a break. But I was saying to Stephen at the weekend, since Matt O'Reilly signed, he's been available for every single game for Celtic, and he's featured in every single game bar one. I think it was his first season, the last game of the season, he's an unused sub. So he's always there, but this is a season where he's been the main player, and he's just started to dip off a wee bit. There has been circumstances behind that, like playing Ida and Kyogo, but he hasn't been getting amongst the goals as much as he was at the start of the season. But I think the team's performing a wee bit better around him, so it takes a wee bit of the shine off him, but he was getting bailing us out with a lot of goals towards the start of the season, and it was always going to happen. They can't have a guy just consistently be brilliant, because teams will figure out ways to try and stop him, and your Celtic, you should have more than one good player. But at the weekend, that's what Stephen said, there's good players in here, and I just said to him, is there? Yeah. Because bar Matt O'Reilly in that starting lineup, who is a player you can really hang your hat on for Celtic? Daizen Maeda's been decent at times, but he's in and out. Kuhn's not done it. Adam Ida's only here. Greg Taylor's been decent, but still a guy you'd think, right, we need to get another left back in. 2 centre-halves, no chance. Iwata coming in has been in and out. So it was a Celtic team that, if you're picking your Celtic team, a lot of these guys don't get near it, and if it's a team at the start of the season, it features a lot of guys. When Brendan Rodgers came in and you handed him the squad, there's a lot of guys playing regularly for Celtic that he would have just not even counted on at all. So that's where I have the difficulty. At the end of the season, no matter what happens with Celtic, I don't know what I want with Brendan Rodgers going forward. Do I want him to stay? Do I think this is going to get better? Then I look at the squad and I just don't know.
When I say Matt O'Reilly's fallen off a cliff, I mean for him. I mean, at least Matt O'Reilly was on the cliff in the first place to fall off. A lot of the other players are standing at the bottom of that cliff, looking up, thinking,
saying, how do you get up there?
You can't fall down from here. so at least Matt O'Reilly has dipped in terms of his own massive contribution from the first half of the season, but there's no getting away from it. He isn't at that level currently that he was before. And I was going to say there before the January window, but I don't want to do that thing where we link it directly to him having been linked with Atletico Madrid. I think that's just a coincidence. I think it's more to do with probably an element of burnout, an element of fatigue that's get to this stage of the season, rather than his head's been turned. He seems like a pretty smart guy.
You know what? I kind of wince at that a wee bit, that accusation, and I have heard, to be honest, the complete opposite. I have heard from people who may know that the complete opposite is true about the move to Atletico Madrid.
So in me trying to avoid that subject altogether, I presented it.
You did. You did.
For you to deny it. Yeah.
You presented it to be discussed, and it's a worthwhile denial, I think. What's this team lacking though? Because when I was watching the Livingston game, and I've thought this a couple of times this season, the team is lacking people to step up and take responsibility. And a lot of what goes wrong at Celtic, I think, is, he'll get it. Someone else will sort us out. And if you just take, for example, was the I'm going to call it the Matt O'Reilly goal, but it's not what I mean. Was that the first goal? Remind me.
That was the second goal.
The second goal. Just take that.
Livingston's second,
Take that as an example. Livingston's second goal. The ball comes over the top. Matt O'Reilly gets the ball nicked off him. There's no one rushing to help. There's no one, and even when he's in the box and the guy's got his hand on him, Stephen Welsh is the nearest defender. There's no impetus. There's no one thinking, now that Callum McGregor's out the side and now that CCV's out the side, there's no one on the pitch for me thinking, right, it's my opportunity to step up and actually make things happen and actually try and take charge of this game in some sort of meaningful way. And I think throughout the pitch, Celtic are sort of lacking leaders with these two players not in the side. And the likes of Iwata, you think to yourself, his style of play is he's a sort of strong, supposedly commanding, supposedly defensive central midfielder. So he's in the thick of it. He's seen a lot of the ball. He's got more or less the full pitch in front of him. He's communicating with the defenders. He should be the archetypal guy who can take charge of a situation because it's all happening in front of him. He's linking in to all sorts of manner of different plays. He's setting up goals, but he just lacks that sort of leadership. And I think it's Celtic are playing right now, to me, like an inexperienced team when they're not really.
No, they're
not really.
No, it's not a particularly young team. I fight back against when that said. I think it was Jim Goodwin who said that a few weeks ago when they were playing St Mirren, I think it was. In fact, it was the same game where Neil Lennon and Brendan Rodgers were having a wee laugh together about how unrealistic the fans are about the form and all. Oh, you caused this. Oh no, you caused this. Punching each other in the shoulder and all. Oh no,
you certainly didn't cause it, Neil Lennon.
No. So,
listen, I love you, but you didn't cause it.
It was the same instance where Jim Goodwin was saying, "Oh, it's a really young team," and I looked at it and I thought, "It's not really though."
No.
I think what he means by that is that there's not an awful lot of experience there, despite all of their ages. I think you look at a guy,
exactly what Brendan Rodgers has been wanting.
Yeah.
So
So he's called for it so many times along with the quality. I think you take a look at guys like Welsh and Scales, and probably to an extent Ralston, and you think, oh, they're young and developing players, but they're not. These are guys in their mid-20s now, but they just haven't really got the...
It's a mentality thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think they've got the experience under their belts that they probably would have wanted to by this point in their careers. The lack of leadership in the team, probably. I just don't know what you really do about that. If you're missing guys like Cameron Carter-Vickers and Callum McGregor, there's only so many leaders you can have available to you. The obvious examples would probably be Joe Hart, to an extent, Matt O'Reilly. Greg Taylor's pretty vocal on the pitch as well. But to be missing so much of that from the team at the same time, basically the spine of your team, because if you look at how people are fond of comparing it to last season, it would have been Cameron Carter-Vickers, Callum McGregor, Kyogo straight down the middle. Kyogo has had his problems this season as well, so we're basically missing all of that when it's come to the crunch time of the season.
Top of the morning to you. That's what it says here. This episode is brought to you by the St Patrick's Day Shamrock Shavers at Manscaped. This year, don't just chase rainbows, make your own pot of gold and groom your little leprechaun with the leaders in below the kilt care. Say goodbye to your clover forest with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and let your confidence shine bright. Embrace the luck of the Irish. Enjoy 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. Head over to manscaped.com and use code TIMS for 20% off and free shipping.
Meet your new lucky charm for St Patrick's Day, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This trimmer comes with 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, one for a classic trim and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. Equipped with dual LED spotlights, navigate your shamrock patch in peace. Worried you'll make a mess? Fear not, this wonder is waterproof.
Stunning quality too.
Shave by the misty moors, under a waterfall, or even during a rain dance. Trimming the hedges in your Irish garden isn't just for below the belt. Complete your look with Manscaped's signature beard hedger, pro kit and handyman electric face shaver. Whether you're sculpting your beard or cleaning up your neckline, these are always the right tools for the job.
The worst content they've ever sent us? Sure is, Stephen. Get 20% off and free shipping with code TIMS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with TIMS at manscaped.com. This St Patrick's Day, make sure your hairy little leprechaun is luckier than ever with Manscaped. I know Melly says like it can't be like this again next season. I just don't see any way. I just don't see any way it's like this next season. I don't even see... In fact, I'd go so far as to say that if Brendan Rodgers was offered a proposition of going again with players of this calibre, I think he would walk. I just do not see it, because even to come out after the game and criticise the performance, you've got for all intents and purposes, what, 12 games left. How much more realistically can you get out of these players by criticising the performance? But Brendan Rodgers is just not willing to lower his standards as a manager. No, this is the way that football should be played, and every manager's like that to a certain extent, where they have a standard of football that they want to play, and they need the players to fully understand that this is what it takes to play here. And I think a lot of managers would rather go down maintaining what they consider their standard is than lower that standard and go down anyway. And I think I'm not saying Brendan Rodgers is, going down. I don't think it's that drastic, but it's just the comments after the game I was quite surprised at, because I was like, right, it was bad, but what are you hoping to get out of by saying it bad? And it's presumably it's just maintaining the standard.
Yeah, it's got to be the fact that, look, if you're not going to do this, then there's no long-term future for you. But unfortunately, right now, we are playing these guys. We are having to play Liam Scales every week, and it kind of...
There's people in the comments, Melly, that think you've got it in for Liam Scales.
I still think he's good and he shouldn't be playing, but you can name other players alongside Liam Scales, whether it be Stephen Welsh, whether it be Bernardo, but this is going to happen with Celtic, and if you're saying Brendan Rodgers gets to go again next season, this will happen next season, because if Celtic stick to this model of bringing in players under 23 from these far-fetched leagues, far-fetched leagues,
far-fetched leagues,
these far-fetched leagues,
far-flung leagues,
far-flung leagues. I'm so busy trying to say leagues. If we're looking at it towards the end of the season, in the last season, you lose Jota, who had 2 seasons under his belt at Celtic, but was so creative. We had brought in Aaron Moy, who was in and out the team, but always featured, and we had Starfelt, who was in his sort of peak years, but always played. So they all go, you replace them with younger players, and they're just not as good. But also, we get to the end of this season, Joe Hart leaves, so then we're left with Callum McGregor and CCV as the leaders. But there's nobody coming up behind that, is there? There's no real leaders there, and this is going to happen because we've seen it happen before with Celtic. Chip away at the quality, and you're left with guys not as good, and you have seasons like this. So when I look at this Celtic team, I said it to you guys before, there's not a lot to like about it. Whereas under Ange, whether it be the first season or the second season, you could see intent there, you could see it, and I thought the team were honest. And I think even at the start of this season, I said, look, this team aren't the best team, but they can suffer a bit and they can get through it. That's gone now. That's gone. This team just doesn't have anything. They don't have that where you can go, do you know what, we're solid defensively, we just can't score. It's not the fact that we're banging in the goals, but we're letting them in. It's not the fact that we've got a great midfield or a great defence or great wingers or anything. It's just a nothing team lacking so much now. And looking at it, how much we've struggled this season, that's going to happen again next season, whether we're in the Champions League or Europa League, because there's going to be more games than usual, so you're going to need to have a better squad. And then, like you said before, Stephen, are we going to bring in another 10 players? Probably. But are they going to be any good unless we completely rip up what we do? Celtic needs some men in there. We need some experience and we need some good players. And we simply are lacking that right now. And it just shows on the pitch that it's an old saying, but nobody's grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck. Well, it's like you're saying, just somebody else do it, or you can do it, or Callum McGregor will sort it, or Cameron Carter-Vickers will sort it. When they two are there, what you're relying on, Joe Hart? And
I think Melly covered a lot of bases there, but I think principally from Brendan Rodgers' point of view, he must, Stephen, be criticising these performances in order to let the players who are there know, I'm not budging 1 inch.
Oh yeah.
That like, if you win 4-2, fine, wasn't good enough, and we're going to go again, and we're going to go again, and we're going to go again until you get it, because we're not out of the league. It's looking like, if the rumours about Callum McGregor being out for the rest of the season are true, and if Carter Vickers is out for the rest of the season, this will be like Apollo 13 if we win the league. Like, I've never seen it like it in my life, how Brendan Rodgers managed to mastermind a league win with that squad minus the 2 quality players that we've spoken about. Plus a Tatty. It's I just the hail levels of I think that's going to fade. That's going to fade like the picture from Back to the Future. It's just going to fade into the background. But Brendan's got no choice, does he? He needs to maintain as best he can standards and hail. Yeah,
it does. It would have been the easiest thing in the world after that game to just come out and say, look, it's a cup game. The most important thing was to get through to the next round. Yeah. And the knock-on of that is that we're sitting here having an entirely different discussion. We're probably sitting going, it was actually a not bad performance, but it was when the manager comes out and puts it in that sort of stark light, we think, do you know what, you're actually right, there's probably things to be worried about there. So I could easily have just shirked that. It would have been the most manager thing in the world to just come out and say, look, the most important thing is that we're in.
Who do you think it was directed at? Because Maeda scored a hat-trick, Nicholas Kuhn played okay, Kyogo scored. Who do you think those comments were directed at? Because they were directed towards somebody. They were directed towards certain players. And I mean, I don't think Nicholas Kuhn walked off the pitch thinking, I was pretty rubbish today. I think it's fair to say it's probably his best game for Celtic so far.
Yeah.
You could, delete Maeda from those comments. That never happened. Adam Ida wasn't great, put himself about. Kyogo comes off the bench, gets a goal. He can probably walk off the pitch going, I don't think the manager was talking about me. So who do you think in particular it was directed at?
Well, that's a hard question, because I don't think I don't think there are any real individual standout performances that I would say were absolutely deplorable. Welsh struggled, right? Welsh really struggled. Scales was kind of himself, really. He has struggled in the post-Christmas season, or part of the season as well. So I think he made mention of the fact that the centre halves weren't pushing the game, so they weren't squeezing up to let Celtic play that high line. And when they do come forward, they're so easily broken on. See that first goal where the guy just plays a ball over the top, and Stephen Welsh is painfully slow.
Yeah,
you can see the moment where he panics and starts to try to sprint. And all that happens is he puts his head down and starts doing a kind of exaggerated sprint gesture, and he doesn't speed up, he just slows down.
So what you've touched on there, I think, is the manager's conundrum, right? Yeah. And I think that is where we're at with Brendan Rodgers. I think you've pinpointed exactly where I think we're at. And it brings in the Forrest comments. Brendan Rodgers wants to play a high line. He wants to play forward passes. He wants every pass more or less to go forward, especially from centre halves. You've got Liam Scales on one side who struggles with passing, and you've got Stephen Welsh on the other side who is very, very slow, right?
Yeah.
But Brendan Rodgers is insisting they play that way. So you can understand, if you're Liam Scales, a nervousness about passing the ball forward, about making incisive passes. Managers asking me to do it, I kind of can't do it. You can understand from Stephen Welsh's position going, Mars is making buttons up here because one ball over the top and I'm definitely no catching it. But this is the way the manager wants me to play. From Brendan Rodgers' point of view, he thinks he's found the best way to play football and win football games. But he can't say, right, okay, I know you're not very good at it. What we're going to do is we're not going to play this high line. And it came to the James Forrest thing, which we'll touch on. I know sort of cut across your point there, but he says James Forrest is my best winger, but he doesn't have the pace. So it's that decision again, isn't it? He wants his wingers to do certain things. Do you go with James Forrest, who can do half the thing but not all of it? Or do you go with what you think's most important, the pacey and the running? I mean, debatable whether or not Celtic are doing that, but do you play with the guys who can do it? And I think that's the crossroads Brendan Rodgers at. He wants to play a certain way. He's worked all season to play this certain way. The players can't do it, so he's sticking with it.
Well, on Brendan Rodgers' criticism of the team and the team's performance in that game, I'm not really sure what it is he's getting at, other than it's just not quite good enough. And I'm struggling to pinpoint exactly what he means by it. Maybe it's just a thing that we've been complaining about, and the fans at large have been complaining about all season, about how it's just too slow in the build-up. It's kind of lacking intent. The midfield are a little bit passive or too easily cut through. Yeah. The defence hasn't been good enough, not creating chances, not coming in at the back post to score goals. On this occasion, that did happen. He mentioned after the game that it was the right side that were creating the goals and the left side that were finishing it off. So that's a good thing, but he still wasn't happy. So it's all the stuff in between that he's not really. He's just not satisfied with it at all. And if I'm honest, Brendan Rodgers has been saying some confusing things about the style of play all season, because he keeps telling us what it is they are doing, but we can't see it. So if he has to keep saying things that are happening on the pitch in his view, from his perspective, but we can't see it, I think there's some sort of disconnect there. He keeps talking about this thing about, it doesn't particularly interest me anymore, but this stuff about how nothing's really changed from Ange's time. We're still playing the same way. It's just the players are different. That presentation he gave to the press about how, if you watch these goals, it's exactly the same thing we're doing. And then he keeps describing the team as very, very intense. And I'm like, is it though? I'd love to see. I don't have it to hand, and I should know better than to bring up something I can't back up. But I'd love to see the data there for the amount of running that a team does, because they keep being described as a running team, and I'm not seeing it. They look static to me.
No, it's. I watched another manager's team, and see, to be honest, I'm getting fed up with the Ange thing. I think, look, we all loved Ange. Anybody knows that watch this podcast knows we love Ange, but he's gone now, and he's Tottenham's manager, and we kind of need to stop simping after Tottenham's manager, right? Because
that'd be easier if it wasn't for Brendan Rodgers. Keeps doing it as well.
Ange is gone and he's never coming back, right?
No.
But the point I'm making is, I watched his team play, and it was like a wee clip about how they play at the press. And crucially, what I noticed was almost nobody takes more than 2 touches on the ball. Touch to get it under control, then the ball goes forward. We're just not doing that.
No,
we're not doing that at defence. The centre halves are certainly not doing it. In the midfield, they're not doing it. And I think maybe what Brendan's criticisms might have been was, in terms of, I just keep coming back to bravery. Like in this game, Matt O'Reilly, not so much. This isn't maybe bravery, but it's intensity. Like Matt O'Reilly was caught on the ball in this game, and Iwata was caught on the ball in the Hearts game. I can't really remember how many times opposition teams have caught. It's just dilly-dallying on the ball. They just go up and take it off Celtic because we're dilly-dallying. I'm not a football brain. There must be a solution to that. The amount of times I watch players in this game, even when Forrest came on, how many times do you see Celtic players now doing that? When they're on the ball, they just stand on the ball and do that. And that's people not making runs. That's people hiding. Or crucially, and I'm willing to say, it might be bad coaching. It might be the manager not drilling into players where they're supposed to be at any point in time when we're going through the thirds. You're supposed to be here. You're supposed to make yourself available. Or it could be the players not doing it. I'm not well versed enough in football coaching to look at it and completely understand what's going wrong. But one thing I have noticed is there's a lot of slowness on the ball from the centre halves, and then when it moves into midfield, there's a lot of dilly-dallying. There's no, give me the ball, I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, look, I don't think we can... It's the intensity, it's not the pace of the game, because Celtic, I think, it's been levelled at as a lot passive and all that. I don't think a lot of it, well, it is, but at the same time, it isn't. Celtic are trying to play a certain way and get into certain areas, but it's the intensity. Under Ange, everybody was bang, bang, bang. If we lost the ball, you've seen floods of players getting back. Like, when that ball goes through for Livingston's first goal, Welsh is just sort of strolling back into it. It looked at Joe Hart as if Joe Hart's going to all of a sudden be Usain Bolt and come out and get it. It's not going to happen. The second goal as well, Matt O'Reilly makes a mistake, and I don't see Welsh busting a gut to get back in and cover him behind or anything like that. So I think it's that intensity the team aren't playing with, that sort of bravery where you go, do you know what, my teammates made a mistake, I'm going to bail them out. And then I think the thing on the ball as well is worth touching on, because so many times this season, and I can't remember the last, I don't know if I've ever seen it, but the amount of times Greg Taylor has the ball and taking a throw in, and he's looking for options, and it takes, sometimes it feels like an eternity before he's got to do something. Then he ends up just throwing it somewhere and hoping. Celtic... There
was one moment, sorry to jump in there, but right in front of me at the game, he was screaming at Iwata because Greg Taylor had the ball about to take a throw in, and Iwata just walked away. And he was screaming at him to turn around.
Because where we sit, we're so close to the touchline. We see it a lot with Greg Taylor, and it's just like, right, what am I meant to do here? There's players should be pulling away and then coming back to try and get the ball, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And I don't. It's easy just to level it as bad coaching, but at the end of the day, no matter how bad or good your coaching is, you need to want the ball, and I don't see enough players wanting the ball and ready to take the ball on and go, do you know what, see if I make a mistake, I'll take that on. These players are playing with fear, I feel. It's just, I'll give the ball away so I don't be the one that makes the mistake, rather than being that guy, like, look, give me the ball, I'll take it, like Callum McGregor does. Remember the game against Rangers last year, 2 years ago, where Aaron Ramsey scores, and you're like, oh no, this is bad. And then Callum McGregor just takes on a couple of players. We get into the box, and Celtic managed to get a goal out it. We don't have anybody else doing that apart from Callum McGregor. There's nobody willing to take that responsibility. And at the same time, I'm looking at the players going, you need to do that. But as well, the manager creates that culture, doesn't he?
Isn't it?
And this is where I'm torn, because under Ange, we were playing away and you could see what we're trying to do, but we maybe just didn't have the players. Under Brendan Rodgers, if we get all our players back fit and we give them 3 players, is it all of a sudden going to completely change how Celtic play? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well, so I suppose my point to that would be, with you said what you see, because I realised that I'm sort of, believe it or not, I talk to myself quite a lot about football and other stuff. Do you want to hear some of it?
Yeah, just put the mic on your own.
Do you want to hear some of it? I record fake podcasts myself. I realise I'm sort of in a situation that I've never been in before with Celtic, where I'm going, right, the team isn't very good. We're not very exciting. We don't look as if we're going to win an awful lot this season, but it's not the manager's fault. And that's because I'm looking at the players going, because Ronnie Dyla's team would batter the Celtic team. Sometimes some of the lineups we played this year, and Ronnie Dyla's team,
including Sedi Yanko and Tyler Blackett,
and some of these guys would probably get battered by Ronnie Dyla's team. So I appreciate what I'm saying, but Melly is right, Stephen, that really you don't really find a situation where all this is happening and the manager doesn't carry the can, and that intensity. Obviously, they're not going to find it now. That I feel that they're like, they're not going to find it in March, April, May, like 3 months to go. They're not going to suddenly spring into gear like someone stuck some, I don't know, horseradish up their arse, right? And before every game, or smelling salts, whatever, right? But you're not going to.
Have they tried that though? Have they tried it? Don't rule it out.
I was out with someone recently that told me how Tom Boyd used to take smelling salts. Were you there?
I thought you were going to say the horseradish.
Yeah, Melly, I was being polite there, but I didn't want to stick anybody in it. But instead of like doing this that you do for smelling salts before the game, like hold them from afar, Tom Boyd used to stick his whole beak right in the jar. So get Tom Boyd off Celtic TV, get him in the dressing room and show him how it's done. Right. point being, it kind of is the manager, isn't it, Stephen, that is responsible for the overall culture around the side.
It's like a loop though, isn't it? Because you say, yes, the can ultimately is carried by the manager, and then you circle all the way back to, but the players are crap though.
Is he passing the can around?
Yeah.
Right, so let's do it this way, Stephen, right? The first goal, the long ball over Stephen Welsh's head, right? How do you stop that?
Very good question. I don't know.
Liam Scales does this weird clearance into nowhere.
So Scales, you're out.
not under a lot of pressure. So goes into the left back, plays it down the line, and Stephen Welsh and Alistair Johnston's deeper than the rest. So plays him on side, and Stephen Welsh is slow to react. Look, I think that's when, sorry, circle back to it, but what you were saying about Brendan Rodgers when he said, who is he having a go at there? Well, it's been levelled at Celtic. We didn't create a lot of chances a lot this season. We created a lot of chances in that game, but we gave a lot up in that game. Whereas before, at the start of the season, we were controlling games, but we weren't creating a lot. So that's what Brendan Rodgers is looking for. He's not happy with 45 minutes or walking off that pitch going, do you know what, we scored 4 goals, our 2 wingers actually contributed this week, so job done. It's again looking at the whole thing and going, I bet there was serious problems. Livingston caused us problems, and Celtic didn't look comfortable for a lot of the game. So if he was to come in and go, do you know what, lads, job done, we're through, some of the players will think that's a standard, that's okay to perform like that. It's not good enough because the defence wasn't good enough. The midfield is again easily broken on, and if a team takes the ball off us, then they can get in on us. So it needs to be that whole collective. I don't think he's just singling out players, because I can't really, like Stephen said, point at players and go, you were terrible today. But as a team, there's so much to work on.
Yeah, I think the solution to not being broken upon or just caught out by a ball over the top every single time would be to just have faster defenders, and that's not something we can fix now, sadly. And again, it's a point I've made several times. Everyone is now witnessing these performances from Scales and Welsh far too many times now, and it's always the other guy. So Lagerbielke's sitting there, he's a Swedish international, he's got 2 caps for Sweden. I'm not reading anything into that, and I think it's pretty abundantly clear that he's not good enough, or he would have been played. Brendan Rodgers isn't just going to stick to it for no reason.
This is another thing for me. We're at the stage now where Brendan wants to win these games.
Yeah.
He's not going to look at.
It's a message to the ball thing.
Yeah,
or try to tank the season.
Like, he's the only criticism I think, and it's not even a criticism, because again, this is another thing with Brendan. Every time he comes out after the game, I can see his logic. I know people just think the man just. I don't really think it's particularly helpful from your own point of view if you just assume everything someone says is a lie. And your perspective is better. You can disagree with the manager, but to think absolutely everything he says is always a lie at all times, I don't think really gets you very far. So I can understand when Brendan says, yes, Nawrocki might be fit this week, but I'm not going to just yank out Liam Scales, who's played every game for me, drop in Nawrocki because I know he might be injured. You don't want to upset that a bit too much. So I can understand the Liam Scales thing. I can completely see it.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, Stephen, the options are obviously not better. Otherwise, he would play them.
Yeah. Lagerbielke, that's what I was about to say about Lagerbielke there is a point I've made before, but it bears repeating now that we're in this situation. He was brought to the club without anyone noticing that he's far too slow to play in these systems. It's a fundamental breakdown of communication there, and it's cost someone their job, which is a good thing, but it's too late to do anything about it this season. If this team is truly just the same as Ange's team, we've just changed a few players out, then again, that's a fundamental flaw in it, because what we did have in that team was Cameron Carter-Vickers, who's good on the ball and is strong and is fast, but we also had Carl Starfelt, whose recovery pace was pretty
That's what I was about to
extraordinary
say there. See, if Celtic wouldn't have conceded either goal if Starfelt and Carter-Vickers were at the back there, wouldn't you? So they would have been quicker playing the ball out as well.
This is also another weird thing that's happening a lot this season, is where, not us, but we have been guilty of it. We're saying, well, if last season, there's a perception that this is a treble winning team and it's basically rolled on for this season, whereas if it was a Formula 1 car from last year, but they took out the engine and put in a tractor engine and took off the tyres and put on tractor tyres, well, it's basically the same thing. What's the problem? Like, it's so vastly different to last year that again, you're looking at Brendan going, is there another way we could have played?
Well, that's it. I'm very wary now of doing the thing, we've lost Starfelt, we've lost Moy, we've lost Jota, because the fact is,
I feel like we talk about Jota every week.
Jota's fairly ridiculous now because this manager never had that player in the first place.
Yeah.
We're getting so far away from it now that it was an argument at the time, but now it's not. It's like, who else is struggling? It's like Mauricio Pochettino being like that. Do you know what? I would be much better than it if I had Drogba and John Terry and Frank Lampard. If I simply had those players, I'd be much better.
Brendan doesn't even know how to pronounce the guy's name. Called him Yoto.
Yoto, that's right. But where it is relevant to this conversation, I feel, with Starfelt in particular, is that, as I say, if we're playing the exact same system, you cannot take out a very fast defender, and that was all the reports at the time. All of these teammates things, so it would be who's the fastest at the club. Almost everybody said Starfelt, ridiculously fast over a certain distance, maybe not the quickest sprinter, but over a distance he was ridiculously fast, and that allowed you to push forward because you knew these guys were always going to bail you out of the back. You cannot take a guy like that out and just Google centre half, regardless of what his physical makeup was, and just stick him in, which is what we've basically done with Gustav Lagerbielke. It's not going to work, and now that he's been a dismal failure, I'm still pissed off about that signing, to be honest. It's nothing to do with him, but the reason he was brought, the way he was brought to the club is completely ridiculous. So he's a complete failure, and Stephen Welsh is back in, and he's no any quicker. So we're trying to play this way and just don't have the players for it, and it's been exposed time and again. And good win though, wasn't it?
Well, I think the difficult thing about the Livingston game is as well, they were two cracking goals.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You're not going to concede those goals every single week, but the flaws were there, and the manager came out after it. We also had the peculiar thing of the manager sort of causing a stir with saying James Forrest is his best winger. Had it not been for a complete lack of pace and legs and energy, and he wasn't. He said time waits for nobody, and ages caught up with James. But in terms of quality, I think he's my best winger. And it's the second time he said it.
Yeah,
Brendan Rodgers actually said this for the second time, and actually, this is maybe a sign of how low that the Celtic team's got. But having had a look at James Forrest, I thought he did quite well against Livingston. I thought that the Kelly game, we probably wouldn't have dropped the points if James Forrest was playing. I think he is quite smart with the ball. He doesn't waste it. He makes a lot of unselfish runs. I think 15-20 minutes of, as I tap the tempo that you get for James Forrest, I think that's valuable when a team's suffering. It's just a weird thing to say that he is my best winger, especially when you've got. But again,
a million of them.
Well, you've got a million. But again, is Brendan Rodgers looking at Kuhn and looking at Yang, going, see out for all your youth and all your energy and your pace and your fitness. See if you had a bit of what this guy had. See if you had those wee clipped crosses into the back post. Yeah. See if you had a bit of his in-game knowledge. You'd be the best winger. Is that maybe what Brendan Rodgers is saying?
James Forrest isn't the answer. He hasn't been for a long time. So Brendan Rodgers coming out...
I don't think anybody's saying that.
No, but the fact is, he is having to come on and contribute in March when Celtic are going for a double here, and this is where Celtic let themselves get to, and it's why all that, look, just keep him around. He's a good guy to have around. Aye, but at some point he's going to need to play. But with James Forrest, and this is why it comes back to it, you can't just keep signing young players, because at the end of the season Forrest could leave as well. So where do these guys learn off? Where do they get their experience from? Just by playing. And we've seen this season, is it good experience playing in a crap team that's not doing well? Because we've had to take every winger out, drop them for extended periods, bring them back in. Even Kuhn came in, should have hit the ground running, proven quality, and he's had to be taken out and put back in. So I think it's...
So that's worked for Kuhn, hasn't it? Because that time on the sidelines, comes back in, he performs well. Same as Yang, he wasn't performing quite well. Brendan went outside, they obviously worked some stuff, brought him back in, and he's been better. So.
Yeah, but in the meantime, Celtic have dropped points in numerous games, so it's a terrible way to work it, isn't it? Because you want to bring in players who can contribute to you right now, and we've got guys like home in the bench who's not even getting on ahead of a guy who is a young player who was at Celtic before Kuhn got here. So I think with the James Forrest thing, shouldn't be here anymore, but when he did come on, he was doing decent things where he was getting the ball, taking his man on, clipping it back, but the manager's coming out and saying he can't do it at this level, yet we're still using him. So it's a difficult one. It's a difficult situation for Celtic to be in. It's difficult for Brendan Rodgers because he's going, I shouldn't really be using this guy, but I am. This is where we are. We just have to lump it and like it right now.
I think you're right. I think there was a lot of confusion about what Brendan Rodgers said about James Forrest specifically, because again, it doesn't really tally up with what we're seeing. I think there was a leap to be very, very bemused by the fact that we're not playing our best player in that position. I think that's how everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people chose to look at it. Well, if he's the best player, why don't you play him then? Because I can understand that, because that is the first time he has kicked a ball since the 23rd of December. So that's almost 3 months he spent completely out of the picture entirely. He hasn't even made a squad for ages, and then all of a sudden comes on off the bench. The only reason he's on the bench in the first place is because Palmer's injured and Abada has just left the club. Mikey Johnson has left the club, so James Forrest is then promoted back into
Did Abada leave
the squad. Yeah.
Didn't see a thing on Twitter about it.
May have missed that one, understandably so. So James Forrest finds himself back in the squad and back on the pitch for the first time in almost 3 months, and people are confused by hearing about how he's the best player in that position. Right?
So
But
is saying he's the best winger, but the same as saying he's my best winger? Because I think this is what Brendan Rodgers is a victim of here. Like, he says he's my best winger, but XXX, and people go, if he's your best winger, play him. And I'm saying, well, Brendan Rodgers is not saying that. You know,
But he should be canny enough to know that that's going to get clipped. That bit's going to get clipped.
Brendan Rodgers is not, but yeah, if he's going to come out and you want him to be honest, and he said he's my best player, but he's my best winger, but he lacks what I need to actually contribute meaningfully in these games.
He's not your best winger then, is he?
But that's not. But this is the semantics. This is the problem. I'm saying to you, I think birthday cake is delicious, but I'm on a diet, so I can't eat it. You go, why are you talking about? Why do you think it's delicious then if you can't eat it? There's, that word "but" is so key in the whole phrase. And this is one thing. Like, I get it. We were talking about this in the Discord earlier. Me and you, Stephen. Patreon.com/20minute-tims if you want involved in some hot Discord action, and extra videos, extra podcasts, and extra writing, of course, and to split the podcast. But Brendan Rodgers right now is under and it's because we're not winning. So be under no mistake. It's because if we were absolutely flying 15 points clear, we hadn't blown a league in the lead and all this sort of stuff, nobody would care, right? But every word he says now is getting poured over microscopically. So when he says blah, 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 but people just sort of, as Melly says, tune out the rest of it and say, well, he's talking about James Forrest, you know, and they lose their ag. And I can get it. I understand why everyone's so sensitive, but
don't say it, but is it necessary to bring up James Forrest?
They're listening to Brendan Rodgers, but they can't hear Brendan Rodgers. That's what I'm saying.
That's White Men Can't Jump.
Sure is.
There's our 90s movie reference for this week, box ticked. I don't have a problem with what he said. I think it was confusing for people, and as you say, Melly, just don't say it.
It blew up online. There was
but he's done this a lot.
There was more than one person digging him up about it.
I just find the whole situation with James Forrest very puzzling because of him being out of the team for so long. Then he comes back in and then he's praised to the high heavens. Brendan Rodgers was talking about how that's the happiest he's been seeing James Forrest out there because he's got the quality and he's got this, he's got that.
Say that?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was the most satisfied he was with the game when James Forrest was Jamesy was out there, because the way he looks after the ball, the way he moves the ball, and I'm like, so effusive in his praise for this guy who can't do it anymore in his own words. So I find that a very confusing situation, because James Forrest has been in this position for basically about 3 seasons now, and he's only 32. And I think they made this point on Sports Sound as well. It's something we've been talking about, I've been thinking about. It's like, why are there such low expectations on James Forrest? I think it's got to be more to it than age, because it's going to sound like a mad comparison, but he's 1 day older than Virgil van Dijk. Now, I know that
captain of Liverpool.
Yeah, I know it's a different position, but you're categorically not convincing me.
Genetically, he might be 1 day older, right? But looking at the two specimens from a pure biological point of view, I think James Forrest has got
he can't be much older than Mo Salah. And again, I'm not comparing these players' ability as footballers. What I'm saying is, if it's just an age thing, then why are these guys still playing at the top level?
Virgil van Dijk looks like he was created in a lab, and James Forrest looks like he was squeezed out of a tube. there's like a
So it's nothing to do with those players. I think there must be more to it than just age. Maybe he's carrying just accumulative injuries over the years. I think he got that quite bad injury. Was that during the COVID season? He got a really bad one. He kept him out for months. So maybe he's just still carrying that
long COVID.
Yeah, maybe it's mileage. It's not the years, honey. It's the mileage. Another movie reference for you. Maybe it's a lot of these things. But I think to just chalk it up to age, that's why people are confused by it and saying he's only 32 years old and he's been like this since he was 29.
I found the Sports Sound thing was pretty weird. There was someone on Sports Sound, I'm not sure who it was, and he completely refuted what Brendan Rodgers says, But based on the fact, I think James Forrest could play 90 minutes 2-3 times a week for Celtic, no bother. And I thought to myself, right, based on what? Because he's not been that player.
When he was 25, that's what it's
he's not
based
been
on.
that player for 2 or 3 years. So the Forrest thing, Melly, I get it. I get why Brendan said it. I actually think Forrest was okay when he came on, and anyone who's listened to podcasts for any period of time will know that's quite a shocking thing for me to say about James Forrest, because he's a player that's frustrated me enormously. But I think Brendan's got a real task on his hands to navigate us 45 minutes by 45 minutes throughout the remainder of this season. And there's two players that we're sort of waiting on updates for, Callum McGregor and Carter Vickers. Which one of those, Melly, though, has the biggest impact when they come back?
Probably Cam and Carter Vickers for me, because I think they're both massive, and I think MD saying Cam McGregor's not been great this season, and we've seen what it's like without him in the last 2 games, and it's scary long term if it was to go the rest of the season. Celtic would drop a lot of points if we didn't have Cam McGregor, but I think when Cam and Carter Vickers was there, he makes every partner he's had alongside him has looked better with him. Even Stephen Welsh has looked good at times, so I think getting him back, because the defence is probably where we're going to lose it. If we're looking at the weekend, Daizen got a hat-trick, and Nicholas Kuhn was very good for Nicholas Kuhn. It was his best
very
performance.
Very encouraging, I thought. Yeah.
So you're looking at that going, do you know what, maybe if we can get performances from they two alongside Yang and Palmer, the wingers will starting to pick up a bit of form there, so maybe that can be a problem that's taken away from us, and we've got, at least if one of them's not having a game, that can be substituted for a guy who's been doing well recently. So I think it's that centre of defence, because Iwata, maybe Hatate comes back after the international break, but if Cameron Carter-Vickers doesn't come back, there's I'm not sure Nawrocki would even take the place of Stephen Welsh at the moment. Lagerbielka's definitely not, and Kobayashi sure as hell isn't.
I was going to say, can I interest you in a UK?
Was his last game for us that Rangers 3-0 game last year?
Potentially, it was one of the...
I can't remember seeing him ever since.
This season. Pretty sure he's not been anywhere near it this season.
So I think it's got to be Cameron Carter-Vickers, but if we need both of them back if we've got any hope here. But a wee bit of positivity was Kuhn was very good, and Maeda got a hat-trick. But
Palmer picked up a knock today. You mentioned you're waiting on him to come back. I don't think he's going to feature this week. They're waiting to find out how he gets on, so you can add him to the he picked up today training.
Kind of interesting bringing Nat Phillips back. Just another emergency loan for 10 games.
I just got him out of my head.
For you, Stephen, who has the biggest impact?
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything Melly said there. I do agree that Callum McGregor is the biggest influence over the entire team, over the entire squad, over the style of play, over the intensity of the play. But you can just about get away with it. I think you can get away with Iwata in there and deputising it. And there are different things you can try in midfield. You could try Home. You could maybe start Kelly for a couple of games, see how he gets on. Bernardo isn't really contributing anything just now. He's been completely anonymous. So there are things you could probably try in there. Unfortunately, we need to just keep playing Matt O'Reilly through it, because he has dropped off a little bit. He does look knackered, but I'm afraid we need you at this stage of the season. However, our cup runneth dry when it comes to the centre halves. It
feels like there's a lot of injuries in football this year, just generally, not just Celtic, all over the place.
Well, I don't know. I would need to look into the stats of that.
Rangers are toiling as well.
Yeah, I think they've had a few injuries, I suppose, but it feels like Celtic have been extraordinarily bad this season, though, particularly in the key players. Again,
Hatate's been out for basically the whole season.
I think Cameron Carter-Vickers maybe only played about 20 games or something like that. Hatate must be fewer than that. He must be about 10 or something like that, it feels like. But I think across the season, Celtic have basically had all of their key players missing for a significant length of time, apart from Matt O'Reilly. Joe Hart treated slightly differently, but because he's the goalkeeper and he's going to play every game all the time anyway. I imagine where we'd be with
I know, I saw Celtic wish happy birthday to Scott Bain the other day, and I thought, I forgot all about Scott.
But yeah, the injuries have been terrible. Really, I can't see us having to do without those two guys for any length of time. I think that the
would you rate our chances with them without?
Without, slim, because I think what we saw against Livingston, despite the fact that it was a win, they are by far the worst team in the league.
Oh, yeah.
And I know it wasn't a league game, but they're the worst domestic team we're likely to face all season, unless you draw, of course, like a lower league team Bucky Thistle, of course, were marginally worse than Livingston. Not much in it. But Livingston are a poor team, and they gave us bother, and it's because of the centre-half pairing, I thought, chiefly. So I really think Cameron Carter-Vickers being out for any length of time is going to be massive. Now, I would stress to add, we don't have any particular insight into that hasn't been widespread. It's just WhatsApp rumours and a wee bit of smoke for there to be no fire online. That there has been a few suggestions that these guys are out for the rest of the season. Brendan Rodgers was sort of calmed that down a wee bit by saying that Cameron Carter-Vickers was a precaution. Hopefully get both of them back after the international break, but Callum McGregor is going to miss the Scotland games. So I really hope that we can get these players back, because I just can't see
I don't think it's defeatist to say that if these guys miss large parts of the last portion of the season, that you've almost got no chance. I don't think it's defeatist, because if you think about the standard of player, including the likes of, as you say, Hatate, that's also been out. These are massive players for us.
Especially 3 of our top 5 players have been missing for most of the season.
I really feel sorry for Cameron Carter-Vickers as well, because that seems like an injury that he's not really had his injury troubles until he got this injury, and it just keeps recurring. And I think we just maybe need to get him to pre-season, hopefully.
I thought you were going to say something else.
What, the knackers you had or something?
Get him to 5.
There's no chance we'll do that. Just give him a 5-year deal. He's stuck. Listen, we've got St Johnstone coming up next, and I was thinking a lot about St Johnstone recently after Neil Warnock walked from Aberdeen, and I was listening to Sports Sound, and oh boy, were they relishing that.
Oh yeah,
they were calling Neil Warnock, I think somebody actually called him a dinosaur. I think this part, and there's a lot of Warnock dinosaur patter coming out, and I thought, well, the St Johnstone manager is Craig Levine.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, there was no dinosaur patter when Craig Levine hung up his podcasting headset to return to football. I had a wee quick look. So Craig Levine, just out of absolute nothing here in terms of... Neil Warnock was manager in the Championship right up until last year, or even this year maybe, and then he became retired, and he came out of retirement to go to Aberdeen. That qualifies you as a dinosaur, right? Sports Sound, that's dinosaur. Craig Levine was the manager of Scotland until 2012, then took a 5-year hiatus from football until he was the manager of Hearts, and then took a 4-year hiatus to become a BBC pundit. Then he became the manager of St Johnstone. So 2 clubs in the last 10 years for Craig Levine.
Hearts, and he gave himself the job.
He gave himself the job at Hearts. So I don't know if he's considered a dinosaur or not, or a forward-thinking young manager. But we've got his St Johnstone team, Melee, at the weekend. Oh, Melee pulled a face, confident.
It's just these games. It's these games that I worry about so much.
The football ones, the Celtic games.
Every game that involves Celtic and that defence, it's the games, the big games where you think, do you know what, this team might come out a bit of Celtic, but St Johnstone won't. But I'm a wee bit feeling better about it with the performances of Kuhn and Maeda.
Yeah.
I think, Celtic have got that maybe sorted for the time being. No Yang again, so it'll probably have to be those 2 if Palma doesn't make it as well. So we've seen this season the 0-0 against them already. They went under Levine then, but I think this game, out all the games recently, Celtic just win by hook or by crook, and just hopefully after the international break we can get Carter-Vickers, McGregor and Hatate back, take it from there. I think every game just try and win it by hook or by crook, and we've sat here tonight, myself included, going, it's not good enough to just win these games, but this is where we are right now. We just need to win it. So any win next week, it's just got to be.
Stephen, I think Livingston causes a lot of problems, I think, because I think there was an element of it being a cup tie. Livingston threw things at that game that I've never really seen Livingston throw things. There was a lot of endeavour for Livingston. There was a lot of chasing down balls. There was a lot of 2 smashing finishes. I think Motherwell a couple of weeks ago was maybe a turning point a bit for Celtic. I thought that. I think the league stuff has been pretty okay. We've made it look pretty run of the mill, and that's really what I want to see from Celtic.
Apart from Hearts, of course.
Apart from Hearts, but things conspire. I say things. John Beaton conspired against us.
So he was having another normal one at the weekend as well. Yeah.
Do not mention at all his competence. That is, you're not allowed to mention or even question it.
No.
But I want to see his return to just another run of the mill, because that we just, as Melly says, we just have to win it.
Yeah, we do. I mean, as much as we're being slightly downbeat about Celtic's chances of fully kicking into gear with 10 games to go or whatever it is, or 10 games, hopefully more than that if we get to the final, 9 games in the league. As much as we're being downbeat on the chances of kicking into gear and blowing teams away and all that, is also just about, there are so few games left that it really is just, one game at a time, cup finals, all that bullshit cliches and all that, right? But it really
Warnock
is.
would be proud.
Yeah.
You've got to fucking die for 3 points in this league.
Yes, R.I.P. Rest in peace, Neil Warnock. He's wived at angles now. What an extraordinary appointment that was. This season is. So we've had Derek Adams,
brilliant,
and Neil Warnock,
box office.
two of the worst managerial appointments this century, probably.
Lee Johnson's just been completely forgot about.
Lee Johnson has been. He's
been
Michael
relegated
Beale,
to doing
yeah,
LinkedIn PowerPoint presentations
he's
over
selling
Zoom.
courses. So
Crypto courses.
he and Beale have both been sacked twice within like 3 months or something. Like, what a season it's been for the managers and the cinch.
Right. Just to bring these shenanigans to a close, I think.
What a podcast!
I know. I think over the course of the last hour, we've decided that we don't know who to blame. Well, maybe James Forrest might be the best winger.
Yeah,
maybe, we can kind of see maybe where Brendan might be coming from there, but he's definitely not the best winger at the same time. We've decided that Craig Levein is a bit of a dinosaur, but so is Neil Warnock and Derek Adams, but at least they were funny and box office with it.
Yep.
And we just need Celtic to win.
Yeah.
And on that,
could have saved us on a quarter or something.
We have but a crumb of hail left. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/20minutetims. Support us on YouTube by subscribing or leaving a comment or sharing and all that good stuff. And we will be back next week.